Up until that night, when Anderson entered my room and everything changed, my life had been going through the motions with no excitement. When I looked into his eyes, I saw more than simply a careless oversight. A long-suppressed longing, a flame he had fought so hard to conceal, was there for all to see. But as soon as I saw he was only playing a game, I resolved to establish the rules at this time. No longer was this solely Anderson's domain. It was time for me to take action. The main issue was, who wins in a game like this between two individuals? I had no idea where our journey would lead us after that one fateful night. Something unsettlingly off-kilter happened that night. A thick, unnerving silence had descended upon the home, enveloping every crevice. Anderson, who is Daniel's nephew, had dined with us before. He was a frequent visitor, a constant yet transient presence in our lives. Anderson had departed after the lunch and Daniel, as was his custom, had dozed down on the couch early, his expressionless, lifeless presence dulling all stimuli. A gray filter had crept into our home through his lack of enthusiasm. My thoughts kept returning to Daniel's apathy while I lay in bed, gazing at the ceiling. Daniel appeared oblivious to my attractiveness, but even at 47 years old, I could see it when I glanced in the mirror. I used to think that this was my punishment, that I was doomed to a life of silent neglect. I was self-aware enough to know that I was shy, perhaps even too shy, but there was a part of me that, after years of conformity, yearned for adventure. My body was barely covered by the thin sheet as I adjusted it, letting out a deep sigh just as I was ready to drift off. I was startled by the mild sound of a floorboard's creak. The thought of the door sent a flutter through my chest. The hallway's dimmer light cast a shadow that seemed to shift. I gasped for air. My voice was low and tinged with a mixture of intrigue and discomfort as I shouted out, "Anderson." With a mix of reluctance and shame on his face, he entered the room. He wore loose jeans that emphasized his athletic form and a fitted t-shirt that clung to his figure. Anderson was a bright, self-assured, and breathtakingly gorgeous 26-year-old, everything Daniel lacked. His voice was scarcely heard as he mumbled an apology. "Earlier, when we were discussing the antiques, I believe I left my suitcase here." For an instant I was perplexed and blinked. Upon realizing that the sheet had fallen, exposing my uncovered shoulders and legs, my body tensed up. I felt a surge of warmth not because I was embarrassed, but because of something far more intricate. My voice remained steady as I called out to Anderson, my heart racing. "Perhaps you should have knocked." Just long enough for me to see. His eyes dipped downward for an instant before swiftly averting them. "It was my mistake." His lips quivered as a faltering grin tugged at his corners of his mouth as he stammered, his cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I'll simply take it and go." Meanwhile, he remained still. His gaze flitted back and forth between me and the floor as if he were subtly pleading with me to let him remain. The air was heavy with unset tension, and the room was painfully quiet. The more I pushed the sheet up to fully cover myself, the faster my breath became. This time I was more forceful when I told Anderson, "Why are you hesitating? Drop everything and run." At last he knelt down and grabbed the bag lying on the floor. However, his eyes betrayed him as he stood up and once again wandered over my legs. There was no denying my perception when our gazes locked once more. A strong attraction and unspoken need. It seemed like the moment went on forever. It seemed like an eternity even though it was only a few seconds. With the moment's weight pressing down on me, my chest clenched. "Anderson," I broke the silence with a whisper-like voice. "You should go." After a brief pause, he nodded, his eyes remaining on me for an excessive amount of time. After that, he walked out the door, his bag clenched in his fist. Sitting in the stillness with my chest thumping against my ribs, I had an epiphany. That was more than an error. At that same moment, things started to shift. Anderson stole a final look at me as he turned to depart. Something I hadn't put my finger on yet was aroused by that expression. The spark that ignited it all was that expression. Become a part of my journey and support my channel if you're here, listening to this confession for the first time. Subscribing and enabling alerts are musts. This story is going to be so captivating that you won't want it to stop. When the doorbell rang early the following morning, I quickly recognized the potential visitor. I was not surprised to see Anderson standing there when I opened the door. You couldn't help but notice the subtle mixture of modest self-confidence and mild discomfort on his face. Even in his most unassuming outfit, t-shirt and jeans, his undeniable good looks were on full display. He spoke to Chloe in a low, soothing voice, smiling gently as if nothing had happened. Last night, I felt the need to express my deepest regrets. I apologize for coming in your room unannounced. I really didn't intend to annoy you. I couldn't help but grin slightly as I heard those remarks. He wasn't being entirely forthright, and I didn't want to tell him that I'd figured it out just yet. Sure thing, I said in a collected manner. Last night, indeed. It was an odd moment, but that's all right. Forget about it. Anderson gave a subtle nod, but there was still some strain on his face. My apologies remain. He expressed remorse if he had made you feel uneasy. His expressions told a story that words alone couldn't convey. As I widened the door, I invited them inside. You've gone to such lengths. We should grab a cup of coffee and sit down to talk. I went to the kitchen to brew the coffee while he entered. His eyes seemed fixated on me as I moved, as if he couldn't help but stare. He was sitting comfortably in the living room when I returned with the coffee, and he was staring at me with all his attention. His expression was one of adoration, as if he were delving into my character to uncover my secrets. He accepted the mug and expressed his gratitude for the coffee. In passing, I feel compelled to mention that my Uncle Daniel is truly fortunate to have you in his life. His comments bothered me and pleased me in an odd manner. I couldn't help but feel both ways. I grinned slightly. Thanks, but I'll admit that things with Daniel aren't exactly thrilling, I said, my voice quivering slightly due to my timidity. Anderson dipped his chin ever so slightly, his grin deepening. According to him, I get it. When it comes to expressing his feelings, my uncle isn't exactly a flower child. It seems like he can just brush things off, can't he? Emotions I had repressed for a long time were unleashed when that sentence hit me. Out of nowhere, I started ranting at him about Daniel's lack of affection, his icy attitude, and his inability to meet my most basic needs as a partner. With each nod, Anderson demonstrated his attentive listening, comprehension, and caring as I spoke. Chloe, he finally replied, his gaze fixed on me the whole time. I think you should get a lot more. I felt a feeling I hadn't experienced in what seemed like an eternity when he spoke to me. It wasn't merely the words he chose, but the delivery, the genuine look in his eyes, the kindness in his voice. It had been years since I'd heard or felt anything like that. You're very kind, I whispered, my voice gentle and sweet. However, I could tell now that it was simultaneous. Last night, he deliberately entered my room. A lot of things were starting to make sense. I could tell Anderson's goal was to win me over since he was really succeeding. A final, irreversible decision was taking shape in my mind. Anderson, your thoughtfulness amazes me, I remarked with a small laugh. However, I must ask, last night what were your true thoughts? There was a sense of challenge in my tone. Anderson drew nearer, his gaze twinkling. Is knowing truly what you desire? Is that so? He inquired. We'll just say it exceeded your expectations. We could both see then that this game was going in a certain direction. However, he didn't have complete control this time. On this occasion, I was also prepared. And from that point on, the course of events would change drastically. The fact that Anderson's expression was a mix of modesty and self-assurance told me the forgotten bag story was all in good fun. Without revealing anything, I sipped my coffee and looked him in the eyes while smiling weakly. In a low voice, I confessed that last night had left me feeling rather ashamed. Never before has anyone else but Daniel seen me in such a state. It was clear that Anderson enjoyed what he heard, even though my statements threw him off guard. After a few time of intense staring, he slowly parted his lips into a smile. Chloe, I apologize if I made you feel uncomfortable, he murmured, his voice kind yet possessing an underlying intensity. However, I must admit that I doubt I will soon forget the sight of you dressed like that. On the surface, his praises irritated me. In my heart, though, I enjoyed it. His genuine interest in me rekindled a passion I hadn't felt in a long time. I simply could not allow him to be in charge. I was determined to win the game this time around. Thanks for being so generous, Anderson, I remarked with a chuckle. Still, I feel like I've had my fill of humiliation for the day. Plus, I need to attend to a few things at the moment. I maintained eye contact with him because I wanted to surprise him and make him desire more. For a few seconds, Anderson remained silent, and his face revealed a mix of disappointment and longing. He rose to his feet and grinned slightly. "Sure thing, Chloe. It was still a pleasure to meet you." According to him, it seems my apology has been acknowledged. I escorted him to the entrance while wearing a subtle smile. "Sure, that's right." I announced that I would see Anderson later. A flutter went through me as I shut the door, and I breathed out deeply. Witnessing Anderson's intense desire for me was exhilarating. However, this was merely the first stage. At this point in the game, it was up to me. Things would progress even farther the following time we met. By the end of that night, I had all the necessary components to put my plan into action. While he was away, Daniel stayed with his mom. There was complete silence in the home, and the nighttime provided the ideal setting for my scheme. An overwhelming sense of anticipation washed over me as I turned off the breakers. Anderson was contacted and a candle was lit. "The power went off," I exclaimed, my voice betraying a mix of fright and simplicity. "The fuse box seems to be malfunctioning. Anderson, could you lend me a hand?" Everything had been meticulously orchestrated so that I would seem like a vulnerable woman in need. I took a deep breath, held the candle tightly, and answered the door when the doorbell rang a bit later. Anderson, as menacing as ever, loomed at the entrance. I couldn't tear my gaze away from him due to his serene expression and slightly disheveled hair. "Is Daniel not home?" he inquired, staring intently at me. "No," I said while smiling gently. I'll admit that I was a bit anxious about being alone when he was at his mom's house for a few days. "Sorry, but I'm not into electrical stuff." "Chloe, I'll take care of it right away," Anderson said with a smile. His self-assured entrance gave me the impression that everything was falling into place according to plan. The tension between us grew almost palpable as he made his way toward the fuse box in the candlelight. At the fuse box, Anderson knelt down and assured us that we would only need a few minutes to open it. At that point, the meat of my plan began to unfold. I carefully undressed, revealing my naked body, while I awaited his return to his feet. I thought I had won the game the second Anderson turned the switch and the lights came back on. His expression of amazement was priceless. His voice was labored as he whispered, "Chloe." His gaze darted over my figure for an instant before settling on mine. At this point, I was the one who had to take charge. I stated calmly and firmly, "This time it's not an accident," without averting my gaze. The room resounded with my words, and I could make out Anderson's long gasp. His look conveyed a mix of astonishment and longing. I realized there was no going back then. Everything was going according to plan, and the outcome of the game would depend on Anderson's reaction. I felt a fire start within of me as I witnessed the expression of disbelief on his face. He appeared to be entirely surrounded. His gaze swept over me, yet he remained silent. I couldn't stand by and do nothing any longer. The gap between us was practically filled as I moved in closer. "Anderson, what's the matter?" "I said that a cat had your tongue." Staring into his eyes, I spoke with a hint of scorn in my voice. "This is the one thing you've been hoping for, hasn't it? I thought you were staring at me the whole time. By purposefully leaving your bag in my room, didn't you intend for this entire ordeal to unfold?" It appeared as though the words were trapped in Anderson's throat when he opened his mouth to speak. It gave me a sense of empowerment to see him in that condition. I lowered my voice somewhat while maintaining a hint of sarcasm, tilting my head ever so slightly. "Do you feel afraid? Anderson, was I mistaken? Perhaps your bravery is limited to discreet looks." It was as if the walls were closing in on him with those words. He began to breathe more rapidly, and his eyes grew darker. He then took action to regain control after realizing he had to. Out of nowhere, he snatched me by the waist and dragged me forcefully toward him. "Chloe, you wanted this," he declared with a loud and determined voice. His mouth slammed down on mine. A man's desperation to reclaim dominion was palpable in the intense, passionate kiss. Everything seemed to come to a halt at that same second. The moment swiftly became out of control due to Anderson's passionate kiss. My pulse was pounding not from fear but from sheer, unquenchable passion as we walked towards the bedroom. Even though I knew it was wrong, I shut out the voice that tried to warn me. I wanted to lose myself in this moment with him more and more. Anderson took hold of my waist as we entered the bedroom and walked me gingerly to the bed. Upon reaching the edge, he pulled me onto the bed with a delicate yet calculated motion. A combination of gentleness and unbridled ardor was evident in his gestures. His intense admiration and need were palpable as he maintained eye contact with me. "So you've been playing games too," he continued, his self-assured smile hinting at his true feelings. "You're an amazing lady, Chloe. Amazing, really." Words like those kindled a fire in me that was already burning brightly. With deliberate motion, Anderson removed his shirt and discarded it on the floor. I couldn't resist the overwhelming attraction I felt for him as I saw his toned physique. He bent down toward me and totally let go in a matter of seconds. Once again, Anderson's lips contacted mine while his face was inches away from mine. This time, his passionate kiss went deeper than before. I was entirely under his power. I drew him nearer as my hands immediately went to his shoulders. He stood directly over me. His self-assured and commanding demeanor captivated and frightened me at the same time. I peeled myself away from the kiss long enough to see his gaze. I said to Anderson, "You're just my kind of man," with a little smile on my lips. He was energized to the core by those remarks. He made it plain with the confident smile that stretched across his face. At this point there was no going back. After completely giving in to each other, this game held the potential of much more. A profound warmth emanated from within me. I gave in to my urges. I persisted in attempting to speak. Every moment was being savored by me. This space, these games, and Anderson. I was incredibly enthralled by everything. The intense feelings I was experiencing quickly manifested physically. Unprecedented responses were emanating from my body. Exactly what was going on with me? Anderson was speechless and gasping for air. He seemed to be getting even with me in some way. I actually enjoyed it, which was rather unusual. I thought it was great. At last he gave in and fell on his knees beside me, gasping for air. I could sense the quick ebb and flow of his chest. Once he turned to stare into my eyes, that self-assured, passionate grin returned. His voice was low and determined as he spoke to Chloe. "What you've started is completely confusing to you. Nothing will prepare you for what we're about to go through as a team." But he continued, laughing softly as he ran his fingers through my hair. "We must first ensure that the next 2 days are fully utilized." My body quivered a little bit, and I was gasping for air. The light bulb went off, and I knew I hadn't been living it up until then. On the inside, it seemed like I had been lifeless. Being here with Anderson at this moment made me feel 20 years younger. I was filled with an incredible rush of energy and enthusiasm. I was eagerly anticipating the next development. The future, including the days to come, remained a mystery to me. One thing was certain, though, things were about to get much more exciting and passionate. This is just the beginning of the narrative, so be sure to tune in. Keep an eye on it. You must have been profoundly impacted by this narrative if you have continued reading this far. Don't miss a thing since there's a lot more to tell. Please consider following this story, enabling notifications, and leaving a comment.